Okay, so today we are going to be learning about writing equations into lines with given information. So not necessarily a graph, not necessarily the y-intercept and slope like yesterday, but just various things of information. Because all you really need to write the equation of a line is a point on that line, which represented yesterday by the y-intercept, and the slope of that line, which was given to us yesterday. So today we're going to work on writing equations without those two very specific pieces of information. All right, so the first thing that we're going to have to learn how to do is cross multiply. Now, to use this method for writing an equation, cross multiplication is where I have two fractions on either side of the equal sign and can cross and multiply the bottoms by the opposite tops. And the reason this works is because if I have a fraction, so say 1/2 equal to 1/2, right? We know this is true. So if we're assuming that this is true, all of the things that I can do to this, I should also be able to do to this. So say if I want to cross multiply, which means bottom times the opposite top, bottom times the opposite top, meaning take the denominator times the opposite numerator, right? So that gives me 2 equals 2, which is still true. Okay, so anytime I have fractions and I'm assuming that they're both equal on either side of the equal sign, then I can cross multiply to simplify. Okay, so let me zoom in on this real quick. All right. And so for this first example here, I'm going to cross the denominator 8 with the numerator x, okay, bottom times the opposite top, and then 10 times 10. So what I end up with is now 10 times 10 equals 8 times x, and that is 100 equals 8x. And I just have to solve for x from there. So divide both sides by 8, divide both sides by 8. I can't reduce this in its entirety, so I have to simplify it. I can divide each of these things by 4. So what I end up with is that x is equal to 25 over 2. Okay, and I'm going to leave it as a fraction just because I like that. You could also change that to a decimal. That would be an exact decimal. All right, now in the second example, we get a little bit more complicated. I want to cross multiply the 5 and the 7, so bottom times the opposite top, but then put parentheses around this b plus 5, because when I multiply this, it's being multiplied as a whole unit, not just separates. Okay, so when I do that, what I end up with is 7 times 5 is equal to 10 times b plus 5. Okay, so the parentheses matter here because then I have to multiply the 10 by both the b and the 5. Okay, so I get 35 is equal to 10b and then 50. Okay, and then I want to solve for b. So subtract 50 from both sides. Get negative 15 is equal to 10b, and then divide both sides by 10. Okay, and I can't reduce or I can't simplify this nicely, so I just have to reduce it. So it's going to be divide both things by 5. Okay, negative 3 over 2. So my final answer is equal to b. Alright, now I want you guys to try number 5. Okay, so to pause the video real quick and try number 5. Alright, so what you should have done, cross multiply the denominator, 2, with the top n minus 6. Remember to put parentheses around it. The denominator 7, cross multiplied with 9. So what you end up with is 9 times n minus 7 is equal to 2 times n minus 6. Okay, and simplify. So I have to distribute to get rid of the parentheses. 9 times n is 9n. 9 times 7, you should have got negative 63. Distribute the 2. You should have got 2n. Distribute to the negative 6 becomes negative 12. Okay, and solve for n. So add 63 to both sides to get rid of that, and subtract 2n. So you should have come up with 7n. That drops out of this side. The negative 2n drops out over here. So we get negative 6. And then finally, divide both sides by 7. So I get n is equal to negative 6 over 7. All right, now to actually write an equation with this method, we're going to use a modified slope equation. So this is assuming that I know a slope, m. So I know my m, and that I also have at least one point. So my modified slope equation is going to be y minus y1, x minus x1, where x1, y1 is a point on the line. Okay, so to write an equation of a line, you have to have at least the slope and one point on the line. Okay, so now let's use that information to help us solve for an equation. Okay, so the first thing is identify slope. Okay, and our slope here is slope of negative 1/3. So my m is equal to negative 1/3. I'm going to write my slope formula up here. M equals y minus y1 over x minus x1. Okay, and then the second thing you do is identify x1 and y1. Okay, so up here I've got a point. It says use the point slope form to write a line to write an equation that passes through the point 3, negative 1 and has a slope of negative 1/3. Write the equation in slope intercept form. Alright, so we've got a lot to do. So identify x1, y1, which x1 is equal to 3, y1 is equal to negative 1. Okay. The third step you do is plug in the information and cross multiply. Okay, so I have my slope formula up here. I have an m is negative 1/3, so I'm going to plug in that information. Negative 1 over 3 is equal to, right, and I've got y. Well, I don't have a y. I have a y1, but I don't have a y. My y1 is negative 1, so I'm going to change that to plus, because minus a negative. And then on the bottom here, I have x minus x1, and my x1 I'm going to plug in 3. Alright, once that's all plugged in, all I have to do, just like I did above, is cross multiply. Okay, so I've got negative 1 times x minus 3, and what I like to do is put parentheses around these to remind myself that they are a grouping. Okay, and then 3 times y plus 1. Okay, so we multiply. Start with the y's. So 3 times y plus 1 is equal to negative 1 times x minus 3. Then to simplify this, I'm going to distribute both things. So 3 times y is 3y. 3 times 1 is positive 3. Equals 2. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. Negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. Now we're not done yet. The last step is to put it into the correct form, if you need to. This is an equation, so if it just asks you to write an equation, once you get to this point, you're done. However, this final instruction up here tells me that I need to put it in slope-intercept form. Okay, so I need to put it in correct form. And in this case, my correct form is slope-intercept form, which, as some of you remember, is y equals mx plus b. Okay, so I need to get the y by itself in this equation. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides to get rid of that. Okay, and what I'm left with, I'm going to move this up here. We get 3y on this side because those cancel out, and this 3 cancels out, so I'm left with 3y is equal to negative x, and then divide both sides by 3 to get the y by itself. So I end up with y is equal to negative 1/3 x in slope-intercept form. Okay, so the other situation that might arise from finding the equation of a line is that you need to find the slope first. Okay, so in this case, it says write the equation of a line that passes through 1, 5, and 2, 3, and write the result in standard form. So the first thing I do is find slope. And this is going to take regular slope form. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We have plenty of practice with this. I have an x1, a y1, an x2, and a y2. Plug in that information. So we get y2 is 3 minus y1 is 5 over x2 is 2 minus x1 is 1. So we get negative 2 over 1. Alright, so that's my slope. Now I already even have my x1 and y1 identified. Okay, so I've got all my information. I have my m is negative 2 over 1, x1 is 1, and y1 is 5. So I'm going to plug that into modified slope form. Okay, so I'm going to take my m equals y minus y1 over x minus x1. Plug in all that information. So I get, let's see, my slope is negative 2 over 1. And I like to leave it as a fraction even though it's just negative 2 because cross multiplying is easier with fractions. Okay. And I don't have a y, so I'm going to leave that, but I do have a y1 now. y1 is 5. And I don't have an x, but I do have an x1 is 1. Now remember, I don't want to plug in all the values because to write the equation, I need 1 point and a slope. I've got the slope, I've got 1 point, so go for it. Right? And then finally, cross multiply. Okay, so put the parentheses around it, take the bottom times the opposite top. So we start with the y's. 1 times y minus 5 equals negative 2 times x minus 1. And then simplify. 1 times y is y. 1 times negative 5 is 5. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Alright, so I've got an equation. Now it tells me to put it into standard form. And remember, standard form is ax plus by equals c, which means I have to move the x over here and this 5 over here. Okay? I get the x and the y on the same side. So to get rid of the x on this side, I'm going to add 2x. And remember, those can't be combined because it's an x and a y, so that's not going to work. They're not like terms. And then to get rid of the 5, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. What I end up with, those cancel, those cancel. Well, the 2x doesn't combine with the y, so it's 2x plus y is equal to, and then 2 plus 5 is 7. Alright, so you're ready to talk about this tomorrow. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a good night. And I'm sorry, the final step, get into the right form. Okay, have a good night. I will see you in class tomorrow.